Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us once again here in the Treehouse. I wanted to give you a heads up that this entry into our Positive Masculinity playlist will look a little bit different than the others. Spencer and I were really excited to take on our first classic film, It's a Wonderful Life. So excited, in fact, that we talked for way too long to reasonably fit into one episode. So what you are about to hear is the first half of our discussion of this unique holiday classic, and we will continue our conversation in 2 weeks in our episode that will be coming out on June 29th. This is a new format for us, so we would love to know what you guys think. Let us know if you like these 2-part episodes, and we might be able to incorporate more of them in the future. As always, take a look at the show notes for content warnings as well as our list of sources, and if you'd like to connect with us or share ideas for future episodes, find us on Instagram and Facebook at A Safe Place for Boys, or email us at safeplaceforboys@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and enjoy the show.
Okay.
I think it's so that you can go down into hell and get some sort of gruff Midwestern man up out of there. That's what you need the wings for. You don't get to have sex and tension with anyone as an angel until you have wings. Welcome to A Safe Place for Boys, compassionate conversations about masculinity in media. I am your host, Kelcee Sykes, and with me, as always, is the richest man in town, Dr. Spencer Todd Bennington, PhD. Spencer, how are you?
You get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car, and by gosh, you get a bell.
Ooh!
That's right. Ding-a-ling, ding-ding-dong.
That's not as exciting as a car, but the taxes are much lower, so I'll take it.
Joke's on you. It's way more exciting than a car because you can go just about as fast and you don't have to stop for red lights. You do probably have to adhere to FAA guidelines. Right.
That's true. We don't see clearance even once wearing any kind of reflective gear, any kind of light affixed to his body. He's gonna get chopped up in some wind turbines for sure.
We also get zero confirmation that he actually gets wings.
Well, as I'm going to say in a few minutes, the actual sort of functioning of heaven as a workplace is a little unclear. We don't get a lot of confirmation about sort of the organizational structure of heaven or like what it takes specifically to move up the ranks. That's not really the point.
So what are we doing today?
What are we talking about today, Spencer?
I thought we were here to talk about the 1940-something film, It's a Wonderful Life.
We are! And you're very close. It's 1946.
Oh, okay.
According to Wikipedia, it is a classic 1946 American Christmas drama film.
And to be clear,
who doesn't love an American Christmas drama film?
I said 1940-something.
Well, yeah.
So,
it's close. You were in the right decade.
No, I wasn't close. I was right. It was.
Okay. All right, Mr. Actually.
Actually.
I should get that point on a technicality.
I should get that point on good phrasing of my answer.
Let me tell you about this movie, shall I? This morning recording session that has good energy, and we're doing really good. All right, so It's a Wonderful Life. This movie opens with scenes of a fictional small town named Bedford Falls, and we hear in the voiceover a series of prayers for a man named George Bailey. The prayers tell us that whoever this guy is, he needs some help. He's a real swell guy, but wouldn't you know it, he never thinks about himself, and now he's in some kind of trouble. And then we get an especially chilling one in a little girl's voice that says, "Please, Lord, something's wrong with Daddy. Please bring Daddy home." So
something's wrong with Daddy.
Just a real fun, chill Christmas mood.
Yeah.
Just to sucker punch you at 8 o'clock on Christmas Eve on NBC. And from there we skip to...
Cut to space.
To space, which is how this movie has chosen to depict biblical heaven. which is, just kind of that big switchboard in space where all the prayers go. And up in biblical heaven, God, or
Nope.
sorry,
Nope.
not God, Franklin?
Thank you, subtitles. Thank you.
Franklin. So there are two entities up there in space. One of them is named Joseph, which that's a good solid biblical name. We love a Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is credited in the captions as Franklin.
And by the by, Joseph, memorable biblical character, Jesus' stepdad, didn't, notably stepped up, right?
Yeah,
so,
he's not the stepdad. He's the dad who stepped up. And now in biblical heaven, he gets to be like a middle manager.
Yeah, I was going to say,
guess.
Franklin, by the way, unnamed biblical hero, is his boss.
Yeah. So this mysterious Franklin figure is in charge up in heaven here on Christmas Eve. And I really like the depiction of God, sorry, Franklin, in this movie, because he does have that, like, overworked middle manager type energy. And, it's Christmas Eve. The A squad is all home with their families, but he's got these emergency calls coming in, and now all of a sudden he's a sheriff trying to solve John Benet Ramsey's murder, just looking around like, oh, it's Christmas. Who do we got? Clarence, you're, and I quote, "You've got the IQ of a rabbit. You want to go keep Jimmy Stewart from killing himself?" It's hilarious. This is a workplace comedy in my mind. And so here we are introduced to Clarence, the guardian angel, who still is in his angel probation period, apparently. We are told that he doesn't have his wings yet, which is why we were talking about wings earlier. What do an angel's wings do? No idea.
I think it's like what you need to get into the good, like, teacher lounge.
That's
it's like
what I was thinking.
It's like the key card, basically. Like, you don't get into the good green room unless you have wings. And he's, by the way, since he's so frigging dumb, apparently, he's been trying to get his for some 250 years or something, right?
Well, that's how long he's been dead for. We don't really know. And who knows how time passes up in heaven. But
it seemed to me they were making a big deal about it.
They were kind of like, I mean, everybody else in Clarence's class got their wings already.
Right. Like, he's got held back a few grades,
Yeah. And the other things that we learn about Clarence in this scene, which turn out to be sort of significant in a roundabout way later, is that he is a, quote, clockmaker with the faith of a child, and he likes the book The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And I believe both of those do get paid off later, but not in ways that are particularly easy to figure out. And so right away we figure out how bizarre this movie's structure is going to be, because the first approximately 2/3 of this movie is the employee training video that Franklin, makes Clarence watch before he can go keep George Bailey from killing himself. We do spend about an hour watching George's entire life story before the plot of this, like, 2 hour and 15-minute long movie begins. So the first period of George's life that Clarence gets to see is his childhood. So when George is about 12 years old, he is sledding. Or not, well, I say sledding.
Some depression-ass sledding.
Yeah, well, pre-depression even. So George and some of his friends, along with his younger brother Harry, are, like, sliding down a very small hill they have, like...
They're on shovels.
Snow shovels sliding down the hill. They're, like, sitting on the shovel part, and they have the handle part between their legs, which I will just say seems like some risky business, boys, but, go with God.
Yeah.
And they are sliding down this hill onto a lake, which has open water at the far end. And now I know that back in the day it used to get cold in the winter and, like, things would freeze. But even in this circumstance, you look at the water and you see the big open hole in it. And maybe, boys, maybe we think I don't try to slide directly at that open hole in the ice.
It's like, all right, have you seen those shuffleboard tables in bars, the little hand, that's like a really fun game, right? And you put $1 in, you play shuffleboard. So imagine if instead of playing shuffleboard and there were 2 teams, one on either end of the table, it was you, the team, on one side of the table, and then the other side was just like open, and you had the risk of, dropping your game pieces off the side of the table. Now imagine if those game pieces are like $100 bills of your own money, and
or
if they slide off the table, or
a living human child.
Yeah, it does get. Yeah, and then there's just the mouth of a monster with grindy teeth on the end. Anyway,
yeah,
so yeah, that's.
So the thing that
the danger is visible.
Picture happening in that scenario happens for George's younger brother Harry, who of course slides a little too far and just plops right down into this freezing water, and George has to go jump into the water and fish him out, and he does save Harry's life, but we are told that he loses his hearing in one of his ears in the process. So we skip a little bit ahead in that same era of George's life, where we see him working at a local drugstore / soda jerk sort of fountain. So I guess the person is the soda jerk. I don't know.
It's a druggist.
It's a druggist. It's a convenience store from the 1910s. I don't know.
It's a pharmacy. Like, it's a pharmacy that has a soda counter.
Yeah. And here George is visited by the 2 women the 2 girls currently who live in Bedford Falls, one of whom is named Violet, and we learn that Violet likes every boy. And that's going to continue to be her personality for the remainder of the movie. She particularly likes George, but she'll flirt with anybody. She's game. She walks in and George is like, "You want some shoelaces?" So this girl is coming into this place every day to buy shoelaces, which to me feels sort of insane, because how many shoelaces does this girl just have piled up in her bedroom? No,
from day one, she's about looking fly. Violet is a queen. Like, she
knows what she wants.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah, and the other character that we meet is little Mary Hatch. And she is, she's a little bit younger than George, and what we learn about her is she is the most ride or die bitch in cinema history, because this girl is like, I don't know, 8, and while George is like getting her some ice cream or whatever he's doing, she leans forward to the ear that he can't hear out of and says, "George Bailey, I'll love you as long as I live." And spoiler alert, she does. And in this exchange, we also see that George, even as a young boy, already has these aspirations of traveling. He's got this magazine in his back pocket. He's like, "Oh, look at all these exotic places you can go. I'm going to be an explorer, and I'll probably have multiple wives." And Mary is just like, "Chill. As long as I'm one of them, that's fine." And we see that George's boss, his name is Mr. Gower. And what we learn about Mr. Gower, he is the pharmacist, and his son has died of the Spanish flu. And he is so grief-stricken that he does not pay attention while he is mixing up some medicine for a boy in the neighborhood, and he accidentally puts poison into it. And there's a very clever visual language in this movie where they communicate to us that he has accidentally put poison in this medicine by showing...
What's a great setup. It's great because we see Mr. Gower with he's smoking and shaking, and his eyes are filled with tears to like emphasize the fact that he can't see well, and we see his glasses as well, and it's like, yes, all these clues, these clever clues,
Yeah. So it's like, oh man, what's going to happen? And then the camera cuts to a giant bottle labeled
poison.
And now, it's a little
as
on
you
the
have,
news.
as you have.
You have to. He probably
big old
also
jug of
sells
poison.
rat poison or something. The jar doesn't say rat poison; it just says poison. But
I find that if it's poison to rats, it's usually poison to just about anything.
Yeah, who needs to be specific?
Yeah.
And so George sees him making this mistake, and his first instinct is to go and ask his father for help. So George's job is to go and like deliver these medications to people at their homes. And so Mr. Gower gives him this, is like, "You go and take it to the people, get out of here." And so George is like, "Oh no, I don't know what to do." So he runs to his father.
This also begins a trend in the movie where George sees a visual sign and like responds to it. He sees a poster in the pharmacy that says, "Just ask Dad."
Yes. Yeah. There are a lot. It's a very well labeled town, Bedford Falls.
Yeah.
And so he runs down to a building called Bailey Building and Loan, which is where both George's father, Peter Bailey, and his uncle Billy work. And when George walks in, his father is in a meeting with a man named Mr. Potter. And Mr. Potter is a capitalist. I don't know exactly what his job is. Is he a banker? It's not. I don't really know how people with money label themselves when what they do is just sort of buy things.
Yeah, he has money, uses people's misfortune as his own opportunity to buy things at a low rate, and then gouges products and forces people out of their homes and manipulates. And so I don't know, what do you call that, a monster?
Yeah. What we find out is his goal throughout the movie is to buy out the building and loan. And he doesn't do that just because he wants to own every establishment in town. That's what he would tell you he wants. But at a certain point, he just kind of becomes obsessed with the Bailey family and being how did they keep winning and how do I stop them from doing that?
Yeah, that's a good point. He goes from being a capitalist to actually a true villain.
Yeah, it becomes a bit pathological.
Yeah.
And we get a hint of Mr. Potter's pathology in this scene because he's talking to the elder Mr. Bailey about how he needs to be foreclosing on his tenants who aren't making their mortgage payments on time. And Peter Bailey is like, well, times are hard and some of these people have children that they're trying to take care of. And Potter responds, they're not my children, which is, sort of the rallying cry of capitalists everywhere, right? Just sort of why should I care if those children starve to death? My children are fine.
Well, then let them die and decrease the surplus population.
Yeah, exactly. It is very, very Ebenezer Scrooge.
At this point specifically, yeah. But then, yeah, I'm glad you said that about it. His character does actually grow. That's why I'm no, he's not a flat character. He doubles down and becomes evil.
He becomes worse as the movie goes on.
Yeah.
And George kind of gets distracted from his mission of trying to prevent a child from being poisoned by seeing this man berate his father. And it's funny, he straight up hits Mr. Potter.
Yeah.
Now granted he's 12, but even at this point Potter is already an old man and this kid just is you can't talk to my dad that way.
Hey, I'm Scrappy Doo. You can't talk to him that way. Hey, my dad's the richest man in town. Hey.
Yeah. So George is you know what? I'm just going to go back to the pharmacy. He goes back to the pharmacy, and Mr. Gower is like, where have you been? I just got a call from the people. They said you didn't bring their drugs by. And he just kind of starts beating George. Just really, and deliberately hitting him on the ear that has already been injured. And George is trying to fend off these blows while also being you poisoned it. Yeah. You put poison in it. I didn't take it there because you put poison in it.
And again, one of the saddest scenes in this whole movie because George, who's this incredibly emotionally intelligent 12-year-old, is, no, Mr. Gower, it's okay. You made a mistake. You didn't mean to. I'm sorry. It's okay. You're all right, Mr. Gower. You're just sad.
Oh, and he connects the dots right away. He's I know you're sad that your son is dead.
Yeah,
and I know you're taking that out on me. But I'm not going to tell anybody what you did. I'm not mad at you. I don't think you're bad. You just made a mistake. And eventually, Mr. Gower does stop hitting him and is just sort of oh, God. Oh, no. Now I do see the giant bottle labeled poison. Yeah. You're right. I did make a mistake.
Yeah.
And so we learn that, George doesn't actually need his dad to tell him what the right thing to do is. He, even as a 12-year-old or whatever, he's got a good head on his shoulders. He knows right from wrong and he knows what to do.
Well, and also more to the point, he can summon what dad would say at this age. He's lived long enough with that father that we see on screen for maybe 5 minutes, and he doesn't say much, but we get this impression of a person who really loves his son.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously George can go back to Mr. Gower and then do the right thing, not naturally, not instinctively, but because he's been raised by that version of Just Ask Dad, you know?
Yeah. So in the next scene, we are introduced to adult George Bailey for the first time. And here I do want to pause because this is where we are first introduced to Jimmy Stewart. And I think that it would be good for the two of us at this point to do our Jimmy Stewart impressions so that it is not hanging like an axe over our audience's head for the rest of this recording.
Do we have a scene? Do we have some lines?
I mean, no, but what are the iconic lines from
Well,
this
I mean,
movie?
like, what do you want from me, Kelcee? What? What do you want from me, huh? You want me to lasso the moon? Is that what you want? You want me to just throw a rope around it, and I'll pull the moon down for you, Kelcee, and then you can take a big old bite out of it or something, even though it's probably radioactive, and then moonbeams will shoot out of your eyes and all through your curly hair, Kelcee, and then.
Yeah.
And then you're supposed to say, and then what?
Sure, I'll take the moon.
Yeah.
Then what? Yeah, that wasn't a very good Donna Reed impression either.
I don't know what she sounds like.
It's much, other than George Bailey, I'll love you the rest of my life.
That was pretty good.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I like that Jimmy Stewart impression. Mine is much worse. And I also was going to use that line, so now I have to think of a new line. I mean, I think his funniest dialogue in the whole movie is later in that same scene when Mary is hiding in a bush and he's just sort of like, well, man doesn't get into a situation like this every day. Well, no, you can't go to the police. They're all the way downtown. Anyway, they'd be on my side. So and that was pretty good.
Yeah, you nailed
good.
it. Yeah, you nailed her.
Oh, thank you.
The Academy Award goes to us.
Wow.
Us.
All right. Well, I just wanted to get that out of the way, you know?
Sure.
People knew it was coming.
Yep.
We'll get it over with. There it was. Okay.
I reserve the right to do it anytime I want.
No, you will.
In any episode of this podcast.
Every episode from here on out will feature a Jimmy Stewart impression somewhere.
Yep,
you have to find it.
Yep.
So in this first scene of adult George Bailey, we see him buying a big old suitcase.
Adult George Bailey.
Adult George.
Sounds like a truck stop. Pull over for adult George Bailey. XXX, adult George Bailey.
It sounds like some kind of like really terrible Depression era like mixed drink.
Ugh.
Yeah, I don't want to know what's in an adult George Bailey.
Probably some amount of Robitussin.
And just like milk. Oh God. Okay. So in this scene we see George buying a big old suitcase, and here
full of Robitussin and milk.
the training video stops for a second because Clarence sees adult George Bailey and is like, who is that?
Stop the presses. What a handsome face.
Yeah.
He literally says.
He's just sort of like, oh, I like him.
Yeah.
So Clarence has decided 2 thumbs up.
Yeah.
And who can blame him? It's adult George Bailey.
Who do you think Jimmy Stewart was like, I don't know, the script's kind of missing something. Don't you think he'd think George Bailey's like extremely handsome?
Yeah, wouldn't they like stop the forward momentum of the movie to show that the person who will be my guardian angel thinks I have just like a beautiful face and a banging body? Like,
probably
I feel
right.
like
I'm just gonna pencil that in.
I feel like that would happen.
Here you go. Just a few notes.
Yeah, so Clarence is into it.
Bit of feedback.
And so we see George he's looking at a suitcase, and it's the same drugstore that he used to work at as a kid, and he's looking at it, he's like, no, the suitcase isn't big enough. I need a real big one. And so the salesperson like gets this giant secondhand trunk out and is like, well, what about this one? And he's like, oh, just take it. It's a gift from old man Gower. Because George is not a rat, and he did not ever tell anybody that Mr. Gower almost killed somebody.
Yeah.
And so Mr. Gower gives him this big trunk, and we learn that George is about to go off to college, but first he's taking a cattle boat to Europe.
Yeah.
And he is going to travel around for a while before going to college for architecture. And everyone in town is very excited for him, including Violet, who's an adult now and is hot.
Yep.
And that's her thing.
That's her whole
and
thing.
She's just like, oh, hey, George, come back and see me sometime.
Excuse me, boys, hold that thought. She's talking to 2 men at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like,
and we see
visibly...
them be like, okay, we'll wait, Miss Violet.
All right, we'll wait right here in the alley until you tell us we can breathe again.
Very hot. George does not really care that much about Violet.
No.
R.I.P.
Cares about adventure.
Yeah, he's got his eye on the prize.
Cattle.
And, the whole Bailey family is in a celebratory mood because his younger brother Harry has just graduated from high school, and he's going to a party that he's bringing pies to because
a
that's
rip-roaring jamboree down at the gymnasium.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
They put that new floor in, don't you know?
Yeah, they put the new floor in. I bet that's not going to come up again.
Nope.
So they're like dancing around their house. They're teasing their mother. They are absolutely sexually harassing their maid.
It's true.
Bit
of manism happening in this film.
Yeah, I mean, cool, boys. Very cool.
1947.
Yeah.
Surprised this is the worst thing we can pull out of this movie.
Yeah.
I'm
All
just going to say that.
I will say I like Annie.
She's hilarious.
I think she's a very funny character, but she is absolutely a racial stereotype, and it is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
So while all of this sort of silliness with Harry is happening, George sits down and has his heart-to-heart with his father, who is stressed out still because he's being harassed by Potter as he has been every day of his whole life. And his father is like, you could come back after college and work here at the building and loan. And George is like, no, absolutely not. I got to get out of this town. I can't sit around in an office for the rest of my life. I want to go and do something important.
Gotta dust the dirt off my boots from this crummy old town. I gotta see the world, Pop. Don't you see? Don't you understand?
And his father is like, well, I would argue that providing affordable housing to people is important, but you know what? That's what you want. That's all right. And George says something very sweet and I think very significant, which is at the end of this conversation, he says, Pop, you want a shock? I think you're a great guy.
I think you're swell.
To which Annie, the maid who has been eavesdropping this whole time, is like, it's about what time one of you lunkheads said it. So we learned that,
Get him, Annie.
this is maybe the first time one of Peter's sons has been like, hey, Dad, you're good.
You're
I like
good.
you.
You're pretty all right.
You're doing okay.
I think you're a swell guy. You're a good dad.
Doing a great job.
Good job.
So George is like, you know what? I think I will go to Harry's high school graduation party as a grown-ass man. So he goes to this high school party, which turns out to be a good decision because everybody loves George, and there are also other adult men at this party. Also, like all of the teachers from the school.
Well, chaperones.
Yeah.
Highly chaperones dance.
Yeah, so there's... Sam Wainwright is here, who just is one of George's old friends.
Hee-haw.
Hee-haw. Violet's here, because there are boys here, and Violet likes boys. Some guy named Marty is here, and
What's
he
up, Marty?
grabs George, and he's like, now, I want you to go dance with my kid sister. It'll really give her a thrill.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good brother behavior, because his sister is Mary, who is also hot now. And talking to just the most boring boy. And also the casting in this scene is really unfair because, Jimmy Stewart's 45 when this movie was made or something like that. Donna Reed, clearly an adult woman, talking to a person who appears to actually be an 18-year-old boy.
Oh, yeah.
And so it is just hysterical when Jimmy Stewart walks up to this woman and is like, do you want to dance? And this guy's like, well, now, hey, I was talking to her.
Now, let me get back to my story. Hey there, Buster. This little punk ass.
So they're doing a Charleston competition.
Yeah, they are.
Because it's the 1920s, and what else are you going to do? And Marty, who is an agent of chaos above all things, goes to the kid that Mary just jilted and is like, hey, you know how they just put a swimming pool under the floor of this basketball court?
Love to save space. So the city of the future, Bedford Falls.
Definitely not just going to rot those floorboards in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Marty has gotten a hold of the key and he gives it to that guy and is like, they're dancing right over it. It's really going to embarrass them if they fall into the pool. But joke's on them because the pool does open and they do fall in, but they make it look so cool and they just keep dancing and everyone's like, this looks like so much fun, and everybody jumps in the pool and then we have a great time. And it's actually really great that they did that because now we get to have a scene of George walking Mary home in borrowed clothes because their clothes got all wet. So George is in a football uniform, which I guess is the only spare clothes they had. And Mary is just like in a robe. And this scene is just some real primo flirting, right? He says, and this is very like, I don't know if this is like a good compliment or not, but he's like, if it wasn't me saying it, I'd say you were the prettiest girl in town. To which she responds, well, why don't you say it? What do you mean, George? Like, just tell me I'm pretty, George. What's wrong with you? And he also tells her, you look older without your clothes on, which is just very good. While they are walking home, they pass by another important entity in Bedford Falls, which is the Granville House, which is this old, just abandoned house. And George is like, oh, we should throw rocks at the windows for good luck. Because you make a wish while you try to break the windows on this old house.
Sure.
And Mary's like, oh, don't do that. Like, this is a house. I want to live in it. And George is like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
That's insane. But Mary has a plan, you see. And so George is like, no, I would never want to live in that house. I'm getting out of this town. I would never want to live in a broken down old house and broken down old town. And Mary is like, interesting. And she picks up a rock and she throws it. And this is where we get George trying to guess what Mary has wished for. And what he thinks she has wished for is...
the moon?
Yeah.
The moon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
'Cause
the moon.
The moon.
Is it?
It's correct.
Yay!
Correct, Spencer. It's the moon.
Got it on the first try.
Yeah. So this is where we get the scene of him saying, oh, you want me to lasso the moon for you, Mary? And she's just like, I mean, sure. And then what? Like, I'll take the moon. What are you going to give me next? And this is another character I really like. They're having this adorable conversation just outside of someone's house because they're walking through the suburbs and this man is sitting on his porch, like trying to read a newspaper or something. It's just like, okay, either kiss her or like get off my lawn.
Yeah.
Don't just talk her to death. And George is like, well, you want me to kiss her? And he's like, youth is wasted on the wrong people.
Hilarious.
Very good. Very good. And so Mary like tries to flee from this interaction, but she is wearing a robe in just the most ludicrous way, which is like untied, and she's like holding it together and just letting the string part of it, the like belt part of it, just like lay on the ground. And so George has stepped on it. When she tries to walk away, the robe falls off. And I guess she like fully took all of her clothes off because now she's naked and hiding in a bush. And I can't decide how I feel about this scene, because on one hand, I do think it's kind of funny. On the other hand, if I were Mary and I was naked and stuck in a bush, I mean, aside from the like public nudity part of it, I can't imagine it's fun to be naked in a bush.
No, she does say good. Ow at one point.
She's getting like stabbed, and he is refusing to give her her robe back
for a very short amount of time.
Sure.
I think like this is where you have to understand context and social interactions very, very carefully before doing something like this, because 9 times out of 10, this is some kind of creepy borderline assault. But like, there is a territory, there is a time window where this is a fun little joke, and then you give the robe back and you don't do anything weird and creepy, which is exactly what happens, but not necessarily because George chose it. Yeah. So, I mean, we see him like walking around the bush with the robe and being like, this is where they're like, well, a man doesn't find himself in this situation every day. George Bailey, give me back my robe.
Yeah.
Ow!
And what troubles me is not so much, like, I think within the confines of, a flirtatious relationship, you can have interactions like this where, like, you're kind of teasing in a way that would be just, like, bad if you hadn't had an established connection with this person. We know Mary likes George, and so, like, ultimately, we as viewers can be like, okay, she specifically is not particularly mad in this situation, but the things that she is saying do evoke like how bad a situation this would be if the roles were even slightly different, because she is talking about like, I'm going to call your mother.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, she's all the way down the street. You're never going to get there in time. And she's like, okay, then I'll call the police. And his response is, well, they're all the way downtown. And besides, they'd be on my side.
Which is funny at first, and then you're like, oh, God.
Oh no. No, they would be. No, they would be.
Geez,
and that's awful.
boys,
And then
like...
she starts saying, then I'm going to scream. And we never really see what George's reaction to that would be, because his uncle drives up right at that minute and is like, your father's had a stroke. We need to go right now. And George just kind of tosses the robe on top of the...
tosses the robe.
Yeah. Peter has died, and George has to give up his trip to Europe to help kind of settle his affairs.
Doesn't have to.
Well, he chooses to.
He chooses to stay
because
home over the summer.
the alternative is let Billy do it.
Which would be a huge mistake.
You shouldn't. Billy's whole thing is that he likes to... Well, he doesn't like to. He forgets things.
Yeah.
He's a very forgetful person. And he...
and we know he drinks.
Has a job out of the goodness of the other Bailey's hearts, basically. Yeah. So the next time we see George, he is in a meeting with the board of the building and loan. And Potter, who is, of course, on the board of the building and loan somehow, it says that now that Peter Bailey is gone, we should dissolve this institution. We don't need it anymore. It doesn't make any money. It's not an efficient business. We should get rid of it. So the board puts it to a vote, and of course George, who is always going to defend his father, is like, you're a mean, bitter old man, and my father is richer than you'll ever be, and I know this isn't a profitable business, but it's good, and then it helps people, and my father thought that was important, and blah blah blah. He gives this big speech, and so the board votes on whether or not they want to dissolve this institution, and the decision that they come to is they want to keep it in place on the condition that George stays and runs it.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah. Which George doesn't want to do because he's about to go to college and he's finally going to get out of town. But if he does that, it means that the people who work at the building and loan don't have a job anymore, and Potter gets what he wants.
And the people who live in those houses that are financed by the building and loan will likely be evicted.
Yeah, so he does make the decision to stay and take over his father's position, keep it out of Potter's hands. And George does this thinking that, he gives the money that he saved up to go to college to Harry so that Harry goes to college. And George is thinking, okay, Harry's going to go to college. He's going to come back after college and he's going to take over this position. And then I'll do my traveling and all the things that I want to do. But wouldn't you know it, Harry went off to college and got himself a wife.
Got himself hitched, actually. Yeah.
He sure did.
Just
and his wife's father works at, I don't know, glass factory or something.
Something like that.
Whatever.
He's got money.
Yeah, he has offered Harry a job, and Harry has decided to take the job. So our boy George is stuck in town once again.
Yep.
But there is good news. Because Mary's back in town.
Hey,
and Ma Bailey is trying to make something happen.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, well, Mary's back in town. She's down there. You could go and talk to her, maybe. And George is like, oh, she likes Sam Wainwright. Yeah. She went off to college. She's all fancy now. She doesn't want to talk to me. And Ma Bailey is just like,
Yep. And then literally points him in the direction, pushes him toward her house. Yeah.
And just to make sure it really happens, she calls Mary and is like, George is on his way over right now. And so Mary is at her house. She's all ready. She has set things up to her specifications. She's got their song playing.
Buffalo gals, why don't you come out tonight? Come out tonight.
She's got her nice new dress on. And she's got, we never really found out what she went to college for, but she does art. And so she has this illustration of George lassoing the moon that she sets up on her little easel.
It's very cute.
And this scene is so hard to watch because this is not obviously the lowest point for George Bailey, but this is a time that he is not at all happy. And this is we see Mary preparing for this to be a really fun, flirtatious, triumphant moment for her. She's like, I called my shot when I was 8 years old. He is coming over. We're going to make this happen. She is excited. And George has just learned that he is stuck for now an indeterminate amount of time. His brother's not going to come take over this job. He doesn't have any idea what his prospects are at this point. He just knows that he's stuck. And we kind of get a sense that maybe he like kind of knows that Mary wants to stay in town. And so there's a part of him that's like, if I hook up with Mary, is that just another like method of staying in town? And Mary's like looking out the window like, are you gonna come in? And he's like, well, I was out taking a walk. I wasn't coming here. And she's like, I was
just out for a walk.
Your mom just called me and said you were coming over. And he's like, well, I didn't tell anybody I was coming over here.
I didn't say I was coming over. I was just fellow was just going for a walk. I was just out for a walk. I don't know. I just don't understand it. I didn't tell anyone I was coming over.
So she's just kind of like, just get in the house. Like, come on.
Just come on, you lunkhead.
You're being so stupid right now. And in the background, her mom is like, oh, Sam Wainwright's calling tonight. Don't go anywhere, Mary.
Right.
And so she lets George in. And this is one of the funnier moments for Mary where her mom is like, who's that? And she's like, it's George Bailey. George Bailey? What does he want? Oh, he's making violent love to me, mother. Sort of like, well, that's Mary's sense of humor. Good for her. But this scene bums me out.
It's hard. Yeah.
When George is already despondent and he walks in and he sees, like, Mary's in this very pretty dress and there's music playing. And she's got this, like, poster that she drew up. And he looks at this drawing of him saying, like, a thing that she has a memory of him saying. And his immediate assumption is that she is making fun of him.
What is this supposed to be? Some kind of joke?
That's so heartbreaking, partially because we have seen her put all this effort in, and you're like, she went to college to learn how to draw so she could make you this nice thing to call back to, like, a moment that you shared together that meant a lot to her, and you have dismissed it. But also, he is in a place where he can't even, like, fathom the idea that someone would like him, and that would be what motivated their behavior towards him at all. It sort of dawns on him over the course of the scene, especially when she takes the call from Sam Wainwright. Now she's being a little bit mean, where she's just like, oh, Sam, hello. It's so nice to talk to you. Yeah. But don't worry that she's hurting Sam's feelings, because while he's on the phone with her, there's just this other woman behind him, like, giving him a massage or whatever. So, like, Sam is not particularly infatuated with Mary. And in fact, once he figures out that George is there, he's like, George? Yeah. Let me talk to George.
Put him on the line.
I want to talk to him about plastics.
Yeah.
Sam Wainwright's rich father is building a plastics factory, and George is like, well, why not build it here in Bedford Falls? And he's like, I think I will.
Yeah. And the idea for the plastics came from George's dreamer brain, because he read something in the library about soybeans. And
then over the course of the phone call, I guess he realizes he's in love with Mary, and they start making out. So they get married, they've got a beautiful honeymoon planned, people have given them money and they've saved up a bunch of money and they're going to travel, they're going to see the world, and surely nothing catastrophic is going to happen to get in the way of their plans. Just kidding, this is 1929. The stock market has crashed and now everyone is rushing the building and loan trying to get their money. Good news. Potter has taken over the bank.
Great.
So the bank isn't going to go under.
Awesome.
And now he wants to buy out the building and loan too.
Oh, okay.
And just save them. So because, there's convoluted financial stuff that happens in this scene, but basically they only keep so much cash on hand in institutions like that. And if a bunch of people rush in all at once and try to withdraw all their cash, you run entirely out of money. And that is what they are on the brink of doing when Mary shows up with their honeymoon fund and is like, how much cash do people need? We've got cash right here. And so she saves the day. They manage to give everybody enough money to last through the sort of crisis until the bank reopens, and it saves the building and loan. But Mary does have, a bit of a wild streak because she has bought that haunted house.
Yeah.
With what money, I don't know. Presumably it cost like $1 to buy that house.
In this scene, I didn't think she had bought the house yet.
Oh, she might be
I thought they were just like squatting. They were just doing some dumb stuff.
But because they gave up their vacation, the townspeople have come together to like put up all these like travel posters in the old Granville house, and they're roasting a chicken in the gross old fireplace, and it's turned it into this sort of tropical bridal suite because Mary has vision, both for George and the house. And this was her wish. She wanted to marry George. She wanted to live in this house. She wanted to build a life with him. And slowly but surely, that is what they get to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we get a section where, you know, she is trying to fix up the house, and meanwhile George is working at the building and loan and building up goodwill with the townspeople, helping them, you know, buy houses that they can afford, and, you know, over the course of a few years attracting more and more ire from Mr. Potter. This is where Potter, you know, goes from just being a boilerplate capitalist to, like, obsessive and a little bit weird about George.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to become a little bit personal in a weird way, because what Potter has figured out about George that some other people haven't is that George is not very happy.
Mm-hmm.
He loves Mary. They're having kids together. That's great. He loves the community. But Potter correctly identifies that, like, the way to put pressure on George is not to threaten him, but to offer him something.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, hey, I could offer you a job. I could pay you $20,000 a year. Could send you to New York a couple of times a year. I could send you to Europe. And here we see George, like, really have to make an active choice to say no to Mr. Potter. And he's really thinking about it.
Yeah.
He is wavering. He's like, well, maybe I should go home and talk it over with my wife. And then
No, I don't need to talk over anything with you, Mr. Potter. In fact, I don't want any of your money.
Yeah. Because again, George doesn't need to ask anyone what the right thing to do is. Even if it makes him unhappy, he knows what the right thing to do is, and he's going to do it. Even if he would love to be able to, you know, buy Mary nice clothes or whatever and travel the world. He also wants to lasso the moon, but he understands that that's not always possible. His principles are going to get in the way as much as the circumstances do. This is the first time that we see, outside of an extenuating circumstance, George just be like, I could have money and travel. I am actively saying no. And there's nothing else that he can sort of blame that decision on.
Same as when he decided that he loved Mary, right? He
Right.
made a decision there of
Yeah.
love over business.
Yeah.
You know?
And then the war.
The wall.
The war comes, as it always does. And we get the sort of obligatory, like, do you guys remember World War II? The boys all went off to war and the ladies stayed home and did scrap drives, except one of the ladies in this case was George, because he couldn't go to war because of his ear, you see?
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so George...
And old Potter? Well, he was on the draft board. 1A. 1A. 1A.
Yeah, I guess that implying that he's just like sending everyone
To the front line. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
For the hell of it.
Here you go.
George is holding air raids and scrap drives, but what we learn about Harry is important in this scene. So Harry does get drafted and he does go to war, and he becomes a pilot who shoots down a certain number of enemy planes, two of whom were going to run into a transport of some kind full of soldiers. And he saves all those soldiers' lives because he prevents the plane from ramming into them. And it is at this point that the plot of the movie starts.
Ah. Okay.
You remember how this is not just like a weird retrospective of a man's life?
Yeah.
There's stuff that happens in this movie.
Okay, sweet.
And it's about to happen now.
What's that?
So imagine this,
Okay.
if you will.
Mhm.
It's Christmas Eve
Sure.
at the building and loan.
Yep.
The bank examiner is here. Why the bank examiner is here on Christmas Eve, it's unclear. Bank examiner doesn't want to be here. He wants to go home and have Christmas with his family. But he just needs to knock this out. He needs to look at their books, make sure everything's up to code, and
The sooner I can do
go
it, the
home.
sooner I can see my family in Poughkeepsie. Or wherever he says.
Yeah. Schenectady. I don't know. I don't know where this movie is even supposed to take place. But wouldn't you know it, dang old Uncle Billy went out to the bank to withdraw some funds that morning, and he stopped to chat with Mr. Potter, as you do. And he had the envelope full of money, and he had a newspaper, and he put one of them inside the other, and I don't know.
So the bit is like, Billy's there to deposit $8,000, and he also has the newspaper which has the headline about the Bailey boy coming home, winning the Medal of Honor, and Billy cannot help himself but rub that into Mr. Potter when he sees them, and so in doing so shoves the newspaper in his face that he's accidentally also put his deposit of $8,000. So when he goes up to the bank teller and says, I'd like to make this deposit, to the building loan, whatever, our money. And he doesn't have the money. And then he's frantically looking for that cash.
Mm-hmm. And you would think that Mr. Potter would be like, hey, here's an envelope. Did you mean to give this to me?
Mm-hmm.
You might want this back. He does not do that because he knows what him having that money means. And it means that the bank examiner is going to notice an $8,000 deficit in their books, and he is going to send the Bailey boys to prison.
Right.
And that has become what Potter wants. So we see, Billy is frantically looking and George starts frantically looking. Obviously, they don't find the money because Potter has the money and he's not going to give it to them.
And he's watching as the Bailey boys are searching frantically around town.
Running around,
he's
trying to retrace their steps.
In their sort of,
Yeah, and George hits his limit and he loses it quite badly. This scene is also incredibly hard to watch because he sort of wanders into his house where his family is getting ready for a welcome home party for Harry, who has just gotten a Congressional Medal of Honor. And, his daughter is practicing Christmas music and, some of the kids are decorating the tree and other ones are doing their homework or whatever. And everything that he can be awful about, George is awful about in this moment. He is yelling at his wife about why do we have to have all these kids? And his son is like, oh, Dad, the neighbor's got a new car. And she's like, well, what's wrong with our car? And why do you keep playing that song over and over again? Really?
After he's walked home in the snowstorm with no coat, and after he's violently shaken down a clearly addled and sleep-ridden or just sleepless Billy, he's yeah, he's in a bad way.
Yeah. The worst part is when his youngest daughter, whose name is Zuzu, has a cold and is in bed, and because they didn't understand how germs worked yet, they were like, oh, it's because she walked home with her coat unbuttoned because she had a flower she didn't want to crush. I don't really know why those things.
She won a flower as a prize.
Well, yeah, she loves the flower.
Sleep, Daddy, I want to look at my flower.
I don't know why she couldn't have buttoned up her coat, but also that wouldn't have kept her from getting a cold, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, her teacher calls the house in a very nice gesture just to be like, I noticed Zuzu wasn't feeling well. I just wanted to check in, make sure she was okay. And George grabs the phone and just lays into this teacher. Is like, you sent my daughter home half naked, and oh, you think we just can't give our kids nice clothes, and you ought to go to jail or whatever he says. And it's just so awful to this teacher. And just starts stomping around the house. He's destroying his own architectural models. He's screaming. Each of his children individually get screamed at. And so his wife is kind of like, you need to take a walk, George. We are not doing this. But she seems to notice that something is very dramatically wrong. Because the kids are like, should we pray for Daddy? And she's like, yes.
Yeah.
Just straight up yes. Yep.
Go pray for Daddy.
You need to go pray for Daddy.
Pray
Something's
extra
very
hard.
wrong. So George, in a state of desperation, goes to Potter and asks him for a loan because he's like, you're the only person in town with that much money. You're the only person who could help me. Potter not only refuses to give George a loan, even as... So in the scene where he's shaking Billy and trying to be like, where did you leave the money? And he says one of us is going to jail and it's not going to be me. In the scene with Potter, he's like, I misplaced the money. And Potter is looking at him going, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
But he's not going to tell George that.
He asks him, he says, you did? You misplaced the money.
And George is just sort of like, nope, I'm taking the fall. This is what because that's what George does, right? He takes the fall when he needs to. But he tells George the thing that George has suspected all along in this scene. One, if he asks the other people in town for help, they're not going to help him. And two, that he is worth more dead than alive. Because the only amount of money George has to his name is his life insurance policy. And George believes him. And so George goes and gets drunk. He gets punched in the face by the teacher's husband. And then he wishes that he was never born. So he goes to a bridge and he is planning to jump. And this is where Clarence is like, I know what I'll do. I've seen Titanic before. I know what I'll do. Just be like, oh, you're going to kill yourself? Well, I guess I'll have to kill myself too.
Mm-hmm. First, though.
Only way to help you. But Clarence does go one further than Jack does in the Titanic, which is he just jumps right into the water fully dressed with his hat still on.
Yeah.
He jumps in first because he is counting on George's savior instincts to overcome his suicidal instincts. And he's right.
Mm-hmm.
George jumps in and he fishes him out. And they're sitting in this building with this guy who I assume mans the bridge in some way, who's having a real weird night.
Yeah.
And they're trying to dry off. And this is where Clarence is like, well, I'm your guardian angel. And I'm here to prevent you from killing yourself. And he frames it in an interesting way because instead of going right into the, like, you have so much to live for, George, you can't do this, it's terrible. He's just like, well, I don't have my wings and I need you to help me. Like, if you kill yourself tonight, I never get my wings. And then what?
You're really screwing me here, pal. It's Christmas Eve.
And so the way that he has conceived of, because remember, Clarence is a clockmaker, and he loves Tom Sawyer, a book in which a character fakes his own death so he can see what people say about him at his funeral. And so Clarence is like, I'm going to take you to an alternate universe where you were never born, and you're going to see what a positive impact you have made on everyone you've ever met. And George, God bless him, does not catch on quickly. No. He stays in denial so much longer than is realistic.
We can just like flash forward through all the little changes that like he doesn't even
understand. No, like... I have gone to a bulleted list
let's
here.
Go.
So here are all the things that are different about this reality in which George is never born, and that which George just like does not. It takes him forever to catch on to this. So he goes first to the bar, where the bartender, it's owned by Martini, Mr. Martini, who is one of the people that George helped to get a house in reality A. In reality B, the Martini family never got to own a home, and so they never got to save enough money to buy the bar, etc., etc. So Mr. Martini doesn't own the bar. The bartender who worked there originally is still there, but now he's an asshole.
And he owns the place.
And he owns the place, which may be better for him, but he is a jerk.
Yeah, he sucks.
Mr. Gower ends up as a homeless man because in this reality he did kill that child and he did go to jail.
Right.
And everyone in town hates him.
Yep.
The town itself is now called Potterville because Mr. Potter managed to buy the whole thing. And it is full of like clubs and bars and pawn shops and like
restrictive signs.
Yeah, a lot of like no walking on the grass, no parking, like just a lot of, you can't use any of the public space anymore.
Yeah.
In like free ways, and it's implied that everyone has to rent these horrible houses and pays rent that's out of control because he's just like a slumlord. Violet is still there, but she is just like a violent drunk now. Ma Bailey is an angry old woman, which is understandable because she only had the one son, and we'll talk about what happened to him in a second. Her husband is gone. She runs a boarding house. She's mistrustful of people. She won't even let George in. Uncle Bailey is in an insane asylum because he lost the building and loan. Truly, truly terrible. Fate worse than death for poor Mary, who is a spinster at the age of like 28 or however old she's supposed to be. And she works at the library and wears glasses. And
glasses?
The funniest thing that they did is they gave her thick eyebrows. Which is, I guess, a sign in the 1940s that a woman would just really let herself go, you know?
Oh, boy.
It's a lot of work to make Donna Reed unattractive, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. She still looks hot. But worst of all is that Harry died as a child. He went into the ice. George wasn't there to save him, and so he died. And as a result, all of the soldiers that he saved during the war died as well. And... This isn't really a change, but Clarence bites the cop and then George punches the cop, which I just thought was funny. And the end result of all of this is George concluding, once he finally like accepts that he's in a simulation, he accepts that he in fact did have a wonderful life. And in fact, it was so wonderful that he would rather go back to reality A, even if that means ending up in jail, than face the reality of the world in which he never existed. And he's so ecstatic to be back that he kind of loses it in the other direction. He's just like running down the street being like, Merry Christmas!
I didn't miss it. I didn't miss it. Boy, go
What
fetch
day
me
is
a
it?
goose.
He like busts into his house where an interesting thing is happening in George's house, which is the feds are in his house.
Yeah.
Or whoever is there to arrest
The
him.
bank examiner's there, and then the dude with the sheriff's there with the warrant.
Yeah.
And the
They're
kids
to-
are upstairs, been
and the
praying for him the whole
children-
time.
And there's no other adults supervising these children. So I'm assuming Mary was just like, okay, I understand you're here to arrest my husband. Can you watch my kids real quick?
Yeah. I feel like she was like, yes, go pray for daddy and don't come out until
Yeah,
I come get
stay
you
in the
because
room.
I have to go run around town.
Yeah. And he is like, isn't it wonderful? I'm going to jail.
Yeah. Crazy, yeah.
But wouldn't you know it, the whole time he's been gone, Mary has been working.
Oh, yeah.
She went door to door and told everybody in town that George is in trouble and that he needed help. And
Hence the prayers.
in this scene, every single person in Bedford Falls comes into George's house and just starts dumping money into a bucket for him. And we get a lot of, like, it's the parade of all the characters we've seen throughout the whole thing. Martini's there and Mr. Gower is there and Annie's there with the funniest line in the whole movie for no reason. She was like, well, I was saving this up to get a divorce if I ever found a husband, which is like, Annie, what?
Hilarious.
Sorry? Everyone else leave. Annie, what are you talking about?
Where's your spinoff series?
I want that sequel. And he gets a telegram from Sam Wainwright saying that his office has been instructed to send him $25,000, which is so much more money than he needs. And then, the army flew Harry back through a storm to make sure he got back in time so that he could give a toast to his brother.
The richest man in town.
Yes. And in this big pile of money, a copy of Tom Sawyer appears. And when he opens it up, it says, "No man is a failure who has friends."
Oh.
And then the bell rings.
Yeah.
And why is the bell ringing significant?
Because teacher says whenever a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. Because it turns out my teacher's an angel and you talk shit to her.
She's gonna beat your ass, Daddy.
Yeah, get smited.
But Clarence has gotten his wings.
Yay!
Hooray!
And so it goes. Can we have a bagel now?
We can have a bagel.
Huzzah!
We've earned it.
It truly is a wonderful life.
It is.
All right, everyone. That is all for part 1 of our discussion of It's a Wonderful Life. Join us in 2 weeks for part 2. We will see you then for more compassionate conversations about masculinity in media. Bye!